Good morning, everyone. We ask that everyone on the outside who is here to participate in this event, please take their seats on the inside as we are momentarily going to start our event. My name is Renique Thomas, and I am one of two hosts for this event today. I am the Senior Policy Analyst in the Policy Research Unit at the PIOJ, and alongside me is Shanice Lewis, an editor at the PIOJ. This event is being videotaped, and I will use this opportunity to bring your attention to the notices at the registration booth and on the inside about how the recordings will be used. You can also view the event information on the website using the information that should be displayed on screen. So once that information is displayed, you can collaborate with us using the chat feature that is displayed upon registration, and we'll be using that to monitor your comments and questions to our presenters throughout the day.
Thank you so much, Renique, for sharing those general reminders. Good morning, everyone. At this time, I invite us to stand for the playing of the national anthem of Jamaica. Please be seated, everyone. Thank you. One of the meaningful collaborations between the UNFPA and the government of Jamaica, represented by the PIOJ, is the observance of World Population Day. Over the years, this observance has featured impactful knowledge-sharing activities, such as the 2012 Symposium at Emancipation Park, under the theme, Adolescent Reproductive Health, It's Your Right, Claim It with Responsibility. In 2018, the occasion was observed at the SDG Go for the Goals Information Fair in Rudolph Elder Park, Morants Bay. As a fun highlight, attendees also got the opportunity to watch the semi-final of the World Cup match right there at the event. Today, the PIOJ will be commemorating World Population Day 2025 by launching the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy, which was tabled in 2022, as well as the 2025 UNFPA State of the World Population Report.
Thanks so much for that overview, Shanice. Now, to get our program underway, Director General of the PIOJ, Dr. Wayne Henry, will deliver opening remarks and greetings. He will be immediately followed by the Deputy Director and Officer in Charge, UNFPA, Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, Jenny Klarlsen. The representative from the Delegation of the European Union to Jamaica, Mr. Aniceto Rodriguez Ruiz, will bring greetings afterwards. They will follow without further introduction. So, Dr. Henry.
I want to recognize our masters of ceremony. They look good and they sound good. I recognize Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness. He's our keynote speaker, and he is to arrive momentarily. Mr. Aniceto Rodriguez Diaz, Head of Cooperation of the European Union Delegation. Mr. Dennis Zulu, United Nations Resident Coordinator. Ms. Jenny Klarlsen, Officer in Charge at UNFPA. Ms. Olga Isaza, UNICEF Representative. Mr. Kishan Kode, UNDP Resident Representative. Ms. Carissa Ribeiro, Chief of Operations of the IDB. Mr. Ian Stein, Representative of PAHO, WHO. Mr. Richard Amenya, the UN AIDS Representative. And Ms. Brithany Clarke, that's Ms. Kingston and St. Andrew Festival Queen. And so, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Every time we say it twice for some reason, good morning. I certainly realize, as we look at the dynamics of an aging population, that I'm part of that population. I'm going on these trips for work, for the government, and I was saying to Dennis Zulu, we were together in Spain, and I said, boy, we don't recover as quickly, right? And that's what I'm realizing, maybe something is happening. But they say as you age, three things happen. One, they said the memory begins to go. 2 and 3, I don't remember. But certainly on behalf of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the PIOJ, it is indeed a great honor for me to welcome you to the launch of the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and the UNFPA's State of the World Population Report 2025. Since the implementation of the revised National Population Policy in 1995, the demographic situation of Jamaica has changed significantly. There has been low or negative absolute growth of the population, a substantial reduction in the child population, and notable increases in the working age and elderly populations, a reduction in fertility among all reproductive age groups, high levels of urbanization and growth of the population in urban centers, and declines in rural areas, and high levels of international migration among professionals and skilled workers, thereby creating shortages in critical fields, including education, health, IT, and related areas. These notable changes in Jamaica's demographic landscape necessitated a comprehensive revision of the 1995 National Population Policy. The revised policy framework was geared towards accounting for demographic and population shifts, as well as fully acknowledging emerging issues and creating an enabling environment for national aspirations for sustainable population development. In 2018, the PIOJ, with support from the European Union, completed a comprehensive population situation analysis, which signaled the first stage of the revision process. This was followed by extensive consultations, approval by Cabinet, and the subsequent tabling of the policy in the Houses of Parliament in 2022. The revised population policy, renamed the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy, is aimed at ensuring that, and quote, population processes are optimized to achieve a balanced population size, structure, and distribution to improve the well-being of the Jamaican population in all dimensions of a sustainable, equitable, and just society, end quote. The development of the policy was led by the multi-sectoral Population Thematic Working Group, comprising representatives from ministries, departments, and agencies, private sector, non-government organizations, civil society bodies, and academia. These stakeholders contributed to all aspects of the policy development process, including the formulation of the Monitoring and Evaluation Framework and Implementation Plan 2024 to 2027. Against the background of the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development, the Montevideo Consensus on Population and Development for Latin America and the Caribbean, the Sustainable Development Goals and Vision 2030 Jamaica, the Government of Jamaica is committed to ensuring the integration of population dynamics into all aspects of development planning. This is particularly so given that the demographic dynamics are integral in all dimensions of sustainable development: social, economic, and environmental. In charting a new course towards realizing Vision 2030 Jamaica, the revised policy will place special emphasis on sustainable development as a framework for population policy and program interventions. The work to achieve sustainable development does not rest solely on one entity. The work to manage population dynamics to achieve optimal population size, structure, and distribution depends on a whole of society approach. The government of Jamaica has benefited tremendously from partnerships with our international development partners. And today, the PIOJ and the UNFPA are simultaneously launching two publications: the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and the UNFPA State of the World Population Report 2025. The 2025 State of the World Population Report is entitled "The Real Fertility Crisis: The Pursuit of Reproductive Agency in a Changing World." And it advocates for reproductive empowerment, the freedom to decide if, when, and how many children to have. The findings of this report are also intertwined with key issues emerging from the revised National Population Policy and provides useful guidelines for addressing reproductive agency at the juncture of below replacement level fertility. It should be noted that the UNFPA provided funding for the monitoring and evaluation framework and implementation plan for the policy. The PIOJ is grateful for all participating stakeholders whose support and sharing of expertise proved invaluable to the policy development process. We welcome you to this launch event and look forward to continuing the close collaboration as we seek to secure the future of our population. Again, we express welcome and wish for everyone a meaningful morning as we mark this very important milestone. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Happy World Population Day. So, the Dr. Honorable Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General, PIOJ, Permanent Secretaries and Representatives of the Government of Jamaica, Mr. Aniceto Rodriguez-Ruiz, Head of Cooperation of the EU Delegation, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Mr. Dennis Zulu, our dearest UN Resident Coordinator, and colleagues from the UN family, agencies and representatives of development partners, esteemed colleagues from civil society and academia. A special welcome to the youth in this room and community voices, ladies and gentlemen. It is both a privilege and pleasure to greet you here today on behalf of the UNFPA Sub-Regional Regional Office for the Caribbean for this milestone occasion, the dual launch of the 2025 State of the World Population Report and Jamaica's National Population and Sustainable Development Policy. Allow me to start with a few words about what we call the SWOP report that also Dr. Henry, you mentioned. Is titled "The Real Fertility Crisis: The Pursuit of Reproductive Agency in a Changing World." The report actually challenges us to shift our perspectives. Indeed, too often today, we see demographic changes portrayed as crisis of either too many people in some places or too few in others. But this report reminds us that the true crisis is not about numbers. It is about agency. It is about whether individuals and couples, especially women and young people, are able to make their own informed decisions about whether, when, and how many children to have. And the report, actually, you will hear from my colleague Andrea later today, it presents unprecedented findings from a survey of 14,000 people in 14 countries, home to over a third of the world's population, revealing that most people still desire to have 2 or more children. Yet nearly 1 in 5 people under the age of 50 do not expect to meet the goal. And among those respondents over the age of 50, over 40% didn't have the number of children they would have chosen. And the reasons are clear. It's not about biology, but it's about barriers to choice. It's about financial constraints, job instability, housing and childcare costs, access to healthcare, and rising anxieties about global crises, from pandemics to climate change. And these are not distant issues in this region. And that is why we're so happy to be here today to launch the SWOP report. Jamaica, like much of our region, stands at the demographic crossroads. As was mentioned earlier, fertility is now below replacement level, the youth cohort is shrinking, while the elderly population grows. Life expectancy continues to rise, and high levels of skilled out-migration reshape our working age population. And this presents both urgency and opportunity. The country still stands in a demographic window where the working age population outnumbers dependents. And this is a powerful moment for us to work together to invest in education, in health, in gender equality, in decent work, in youth empowerment, a window that can translate into demographic dividend, accelerated economic growth, and social resilience. But these benefits are not automatic. The moment calls for shared vision and partnership, transcending both public and private sector, civil society, and importantly also listening to our youth. And in this context, we warmly commend and congratulate the Government of Jamaica and the Planning Institute of Jamaica for spearheading this revised national population and sustainable development policy, a bold, evidence-informed response to today's demographic realities in the country, but also to the Caribbean, as a champion of population issues in the Caribbean. The population policy aligns with the Vision 2030 Jamaica and the Sustainable Development Goals, but also, as was mentioned, the ICPD Program of Action, the International Conference on Population and Development. And I was very happy to speak to Mr. Easton Williams, who was in Cairo in 1994 for the adoption of the ICPD Program of Action, again marking how Jamaica has really been at the front line of population issues in the Caribbean and SIDS context. And so today really sends a clear signal of Jamaica's intent to proactively shape its demographic future, grounded in evidence, equity, and national values. It's rooted in human rights, gender equality, and inclusive development. And let us once again be clear. Declining fertility and increased longevity are milestones of major societal transformation, evidence of women's empowerment, expanded access to healthcare, and rising life standards. But they demand us to be bold and inclusive in our policy actions. We need to strengthen our social protection systems for older persons. We need to invest in the care economy, silver economy, for example, and take into account that the women still carry the greatest burden of unpaid work. We need to look at our parental leave that supports both men and women to share caregiving and the social norms that enable this type of change. UNFPA remains a steadfast partner to the Government of Jamaica and in the Caribbean. As a UN public health and population data agency, we will continue to focus on strengthening national population data systems, supporting youth leadership, and promoting gender equality, as well as, of course, at the center of our mandate, advancing universal access to sexual reproductive health and rights. We see ourselves as a convener, as someone who can support governments to provide demographic intelligence tools and best practices from around the world to actually address this very complex demographic challenges. We work with CARICOM, with ECLAC, with other UN family members, and we really appreciate the partnership with PIOJ in addressing these issues at the sub-regional level. So as we look forward, let us remember, people are not numbers to be managed. They are lives to be empowered. As an indigenous woman from the north of Norway, from the Arctic, it was not easy. And I have to say, I really learned from very early that disaggregated data really matters to lives. And that is why I feel so passionate about UNFPA's mandate and our work with PIOJ. And I really am happy to be here today. And I want to once again reiterate that demographic change is not a crisis, it is a catalyst. It brings us opportunities to build societies where every person, regardless of age or income, can live with dignity. Every young person can realize their potential. Every older person is supported with dignity, and every woman, man, and couple can make their own decisions about their bodies, families, and futures. So let us seize this moment and work together while leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Protocol has already been established, but I would like, nevertheless, to acknowledge some very good friends, because not just colleagues, but also very good friends here, like Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General of PIOJ, but also all the other friends of PIOJ. Also, of course, Jenny Klarlsen, Deputy Director of UNFPA in the Caribbean, that just delivered her speech. Also Dennis Zulu, UN Resident Coordinator, Carissa Ribeiro, IDB, but also all the other heads of agency and colleagues working for UN agencies, civil society, press, everybody, all the friends, good morning today. I would like first to thank PIOJ for this invitation in this World Population Day, in which we are attending the presentation of two very important documents. We have the 2025 State of the World Population Report by UNFPA, and also the Jamaica's National Population and Sustainable Development Policy. And I would like to congratulate both organizations, UNFPA and PIOJ, for the excellent work done and the excellent products that they are presenting today, and also to all those people who contributed to that. The European Union has, as Dr. Henry mentioned, has participated in the funding of the production of this document for one main reason. Because at the EU, we are very convinced in a people-centered approach to development. Because development is about people. This is why these kind of documents are absolutely crucial and essential for doing our job as development partners, because, as I say, the focus of development and the main reason for our work is people. These two documents are fixing two different levels. They are very complementary to each other, because on one hand, we have the work done by the UNFPA tackling global democratic trends, challenges, opportunities. It's absolutely essential for us to understand how all these changes affect and interact with critical issues like public health, like gender equality, economic stability, climate change, and you name it. For middle-income countries like Jamaica, this means preparing for transitions in labor markets, for healthcare systems, education, and keeping always in mind, as it has been also stated here, no one left behind. On the other hand, as I say, they are very complementary. The Jamaica's National Population and Sustainable Development Policy enters into more local specificities that need to be addressed. And there we have migrations, we have family formation, urbanization. Dr. Henry mentioned population aging. where I have to enter as well in this club, among others. You know, in Europe, at the European Union, because now there are many people also talking, there are some trends in the world talking about migrations, about if migrations are good or bad, or about migrants. In Europe, at the European Union, we are around 450 million people. There is a projection done by our statistical institute, Eurostat, stating that in 75 years, I mean in 2100, this population will be continuing the current trend, reduced to only 419 million people, 6% less in 75 years. When I say continuing the same trend, I'm meaning with the current migrations trends as well. Let's imagine a hypothesis in which Europe closes the door and we have no more migrants in these 75 years. These current 450 million people would be reduced to less than 300 million in these 75 years. Jenny, she mentioned that in the study there is too many people in one place and too few in another place. This is also about migrations. You know, there was a Spanish writer, he said, Juan Goitisolo, he said, because usually some politicians, they talk about keeping our roots, protecting our roots. Roots, as this writer said, the trees have roots. And the trees spend the whole life in the same square meter. The humans, we have feet. And the feet are to move. And since the very beginning, when Lucy fell from the tree somewhere in Ethiopia, human beings have been moving all the time. And this is also something that this report should also reflect. Now coming back to our partnership with Jamaica, the European Union has been a long-standing partner with Jamaica. We are in fact celebrating 50 years now in 2025. And not only doing cooperation or doing development cooperation, but doing cooperation in many other fields, in trade. We consider Jamaica as a very good and close political partner as well. And all this time, our cooperation has been inspired by a rights-based, gender-sensitive approach. And as I said at the beginning, with the population, with the people, with the human beings in the center of all the exercise. These documents that we are presenting today, they are important because they provide data, they provide good analysis, facts-based and data-based policies and decisions have to take these documents as a basis. You know, we are also in challenging times for development cooperation in the world. And I have to say, continuing with this 50 years long-standing partnership with Jamaica, that the European Union stays committed to continue supporting Jamaica and many other partners in the world in this way forward to development. And for that, population and demographics are on the roots of our current three main priorities. You know that in our bilateral cooperation we have three main priorities: digital transformation, is citizen security, and is climate resilience and green growth. In all the three, you see in the very middle the human beings and the citizens. That's it. Thank you very much to all of you, and I hope a very nice session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez-Durez, and thank you to our earlier presenters. We heard some very interesting facts. We heard about the decline in key aspects of our population trends, and population movements. Also, we heard about reproductive agency, and it was very interesting to hear personally that it's not just a matter of, yes, fertility rates are declining, but what are the factors that affect this decline? And it's really not just a matter of persons choosing how many children they want to have, but how will those goals be achieved based on the different situations in their particular society? So it was very interesting to hear. Thank you all for your earlier remarks. And it really underscores the importance of the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and the SWOP report. At this time, we invite you to view a short video aimed at raising national awareness of the goals of this policy. Immediately following the video, PIOJ Director of Population and Health, Mareeca Brown-Bailey, will deliver a presentation on the policy. She will be followed by the UNFPA Liaison Specialist for Jamaica, Andre Richards, who will deliver highlights of the 2025 State of the World Population Report.
Like the tides that shape our shores, Jamaica's population is shifting, growing older, growing slower, and growing smaller as many leave our island for opportunities abroad. These changes aren't unique to us, and Jamaica has a plan. Bold actions in the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and Program of Action. The national goal is a balanced population growth that supports the well-being of all Jamaicans, children and youth, working-age persons and older persons, adequate services for persons with disabilities and other vulnerable groups. A Jamaica where no one is left behind. We're seeing progress. The Economic and Social Survey Jamaica shows that life expectancy in the late 1960s and 1970s was about 65 years. In 2011, it was 75 years. About 16% of the population now has tertiary education. In 1962, it was less than 1%. The 2022 Jamaica Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey notes that there is almost universal access to improved drinking water in Jamaican households. But challenges remain. Our birth rate has dropped below replacement of the population. Too many skilled Jamaicans are leaving, and about 50% of households in rural areas do not have access to improved drinking water in the home. Jamaicans agree that we need actions to enable persons at every life stage. Quality healthcare, education and training, and attractive jobs. Incentives need to be developed to attract and retain highly skilled professionals in Jamaica. This is critical for major service sectors such as health, finance, energy, information technology, agriculture, infrastructure, and education. We must pursue ongoing policy changes to facilitate protection and income security for vulnerable groups, such as persons with disabilities and the elderly. This is to include the portability of pensions and other social and financial benefits. The solutions may not always be easy to achieve, but the vision is clear. We want a cohesive Jamaican society that is fresh, inclusive, and thriving for generations to come.
Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. I want to, on behalf of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, thank you all for being here this morning. And I am going to be presenting, I'm just giving you a brief synopsis of the policy. And this policy, we're here today because of the work, and it is reflective of the work that a number of you in the room have been doing over a number of years. So we take this opportunity, and I'm asking you to take the opportunity to applaud yourselves, because the PIOJ could not have done this without you. So we thank you very much, and we are grateful for the work that you have been doing and that you have done to get the policy to this stage. So I'm going to give you a little information. I'm going to be like Mr. Williams this morning to give you a little history, because those of you who interact with Easton knows that he has some history. And he is very knowledgeable about things related to population and development in our country. So Mr. Williams, we salute you and we salute the work that you have done, and we thank you. So Jamaica was the first country in the English-speaking Caribbean and among the first developing countries to formulate and adopt an explicit national policy. And this was done in 1983. This policy and the National Program of Action on Population and Development was revised in 1995. And the objective of the 1995 policy was consistent with the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development, Cairo, in 1994. So some of the achievements of the 1995 national policy at the time was that we were seeing a number of progress in legislation and policy reform, and these were related to children, adolescent, youth, the elderly, trafficking in persons, sexual offenses, and an entire gamut of national issues that affected our countries. We also, through that process, saw the universal access to affordable, quality health care and advancements in gender equality and gender equity. Through that process, too, we saw that there was universal access to primary and secondary education. We began to see reductions in fertility and reductions in the average household size. And we saw, and we continue to see, reductions in mother-to-child transmission of HIV and deaths related to HIV/AIDS, and reductions in infant, child, and maternal mortality. But we recognize that times have changed, and since 1995, we know that there are many issues that have come to the fore, and we are seeing quite a number of demographic changes. So the current demographic situation include that we are seeing reduction in population growth. We are seeing a reduction in the child population, as the DG mentioned earlier, an increase in the working age population, and an increase in the elderly populations. We are seeing increases in life expectancy at birth, and of course, these were attributed to the work that was done from the 1995 policy framework. We are seeing higher levels of urbanization and people moving out of rural areas, and some of these rural areas becoming urbanized. And we're seeing high levels of international migration, especially from high-skilled and professional groups. So these changes necessitated a revision of the 1995 population policy. And this process to do the revision, was completed in 3 stages. We had the preparation of the comprehensive population situation analysis, and as indicated before, we had significant technical assistance from our European Union partners, and we utilized that situation analysis to help us to determine where we are in terms of our population dynamics. Following that, we utilized the situation analysis to draft a revised policy, and we also held island-wide technical consultations, and a number of you would have been a part of those processes. And we started that process in about 2017 into 2018. We then submitted the draft policy to Cabinet for approval as green paper. Following that submission, we had further consultations, more technical consultations, and we had the subsequent tabling of the policy in Parliament in 2022. The principles of the policy, it's grounded in human rights. So we cannot do anything without recognizing the importance of the dignity and rights of our humans, because of course we're looking at the population. The policy is about humans. It is inclusive and it speaks to participatory development. The framework of one of the principles of the policy also speaks to gender equality and gender equity, and it looks at personal responsibility and empowerment of persons. It is based on the evidence, because we cannot say that we're helping persons and we want to look at the current demographic dynamics and put things in place without knowing what exists. So we have to, the policy is driven in evidence. There's also a resilience in the natural built social, cultural, and economic environments, looking particularly at the nexus between population and development and climate change. There is the principle of transparency and accountability, recognizing that we all have a work to do. We're all accountable actors in this process. And of course, the importance of being transparent. So whatever evidence that we have collected and whatever programs that we're developing, it is transparent and all are aware of where we're going. And it speaks of the principle of reproductive rights and the power of choice. And as DG said earlier, it's intertwined with the current 2025 SWOP report that we're also launching. So the vision statement of the policy is that we want a population, we want a stable and productive population that contributes to sustainable development of the country. And when we're speaking to sustainable development, we're speaking to sustainable development in all three dimensions: economic, social, and environment. The overall policy goal is that population dynamics are optimized to achieve the desired population size, structure, and distribution to improve the well-being of the Jamaican population in all dimensions of a sustainable, equitable, and just society. So it may seem wordy and it may seem a lot, but basically what we want is that our population is optimized to achieve its fullest potential, and that there's equitable justice across all areas of the society. So we have 12 policy goals, and the first goal speaks to Jamaica's population size, growth, age structure, and spatial distribution being aligned to support sustainable development in all dimensions. The second goal, and I think the goals are self-explanatory, and the pictures will help you to understand where we want to go. The second goal is that by 2030, replacement level fertility of 2.1 is maintained. We recognize that we are below that, and we will have some further discussions as we go into the panel discussion section to see how we work through some of those issues, particularly with the issue pertaining to our below replacement level fertility. Goal 3 speaks to full integration and expansion of quality sexual and reproductive healthcare services in primary healthcare. Goal 4 speaks to by 2030, we want life expectancy at birth to reach 75 years for males and 80 years for females. And we may ask the question, why 75 for males and 80 for females? But I'm not going to answer that. We're going to talk about that. Goal 5 is by 2030, we have international migration, meaning immigration and emigration is managed and mobilized to support Jamaica's national development. And we know the situation that we're having as we speak to the issue of international migration, and we know that in the current climate, there are new developments, so we want to know how we manage that. We also understand that our highly skilled professionals are moving out, so we want to harness the skills that we have, particularly in the working age population. But we know that people have the choice to leave, so when they leave, how do we manage that process? And when people come, how do we manage that process to ensure our national development? Goal 6 speaks to internal population movement, and I indicated before we have the issue of urbanization. So we want so Goal 6 speaks to internal population movement and distribution are interlinked with developmental policies and strategies for ensuring rural-urban development. Goal 7, by 2030, equal and equitable access to opportunities, resources, and rewards for males and females is achieved in all spheres of society. Goal 8 speaks to by 2030, we have provisions in place to enable older populations, those 60 years and over, to lead fulfilling, functional, and productive lives. We recognize the value of our older population, and we want to harness not only their experiences, but how we can continue to engage with them. How is it that we will have productive aging, as we recognize that our population is aging. And by 2030, Goal 9, all children, adolescents, and youth shall be empowered to fulfill their fullest potential in all areas of life. Quickly, Goal 10, 11, and 12. Goal 10 speaks to strengthening our institutional capacities, and we have been doing that through the work of the Population Thematic Working Group and through processes like these where we come together as government, ministries, departments, and agencies, international development partners, or academia, or private sector. How is it that we can continue to strengthen these capacities that we have, and how can we have interoperable information and communication technology systems to facilitate the provisions of relevant, accurate, timely, and comprehensive demographic data? Then by Goal 11 speaks to, by 2030, we are now harnessing the demographic dividend to effectively mobilize and facilitate sustainable development. And Goal 12 speaks to effective implementation of the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and Program of Action in all areas of development. So we call the policy the NPSDP for short. The framework is that this policy, as we begin to implement programs and actions from this particular framework, it is embedded in sustainable development. So sustainable development is a framework for population policy and programmatic interventions. We want to also look at managing population dynamics to achieve the desired population size, structure, and distribution to improve the well-being of the Jamaican population. And we want to continue to mobilize a large working age population to boost sustained economic growth and sustainable development. We have been achieving this, and we want to continue through this renamed National Population Policy to further reduce infant, child, and maternal mortality, to further reduce the incidence and occurrence of HIV/AIDS and non-communicable diseases. We want to, of course, integrate population and aging issues in all national and subnational development processes and incorporate population growth and distribution in urbanization and climate change policies and plans. The policy will continue to focus on incorporating issues pertaining to international migration and diaspora issues in national development planning processes, and ensure that human rights and gender issues pertaining to vulnerability of our population continue to be integrated in all our plans and programs. So how do we expect to do this? And this is the crux of the matter. This is where the rubber meets the road. And this is what we have been trying to do since about 2024 with the program of action and, of course, the attendant monitoring and evaluation framework and implementation plan. So the program of action, which is attached to the population policy, speaks to a number of specific actions that need to be taken to realize these goals and objectives. It is particularly linked to the goals within the population policy, and it also includes indicators to monitor the progress of each. So to further drill down, we need to determine how we are now realizing these goals, if we are meeting our particular targets. So we have now developed a monitoring and evaluation framework. And this framework will serve as a comprehensive roadmap for guiding how we implement the activities for the duration of the policy. This framework will facilitate effective program management and enable implementing partners to monitor and report on progress, your strategic actions, and the overall achievements of your goals and strategic objectives. So we have started this process. We have been engaging with you, and we will continue to engage with you to strengthen the M&E framework and to look specifically at how is it that the plans and programs that you are implementing intersect and intertwine with the population policy. So at this time, I want to take the opportunity to thank particularly members of the population thematic working group who have done stellar work under this process. And we also want to thank persons who started the process with the PIOJ but are now no longer with the PIOJ, but have come on board to partner with the PIOJ again to help us to carry this process through. I speak specifically to Mr. Andrew Richards over there. And I also want to recognize to Miss Stacy and Robinson. I think she's here from State, yes. So these two persons especially, and I note that our other former demographer, Miss Aisha Graham, these persons worked tirelessly to get the policy to where it's at. And I also want to mention our former director of Population and Health, Mrs. Tony Shea Freckleton. So the work has been tremendous. It has been good, and we have seen the fruits of our labor. And I want to thank you. And as we move into the M&E process and the M&E plan, we ask for your continued support. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you. Wow. To thank you and to ask you to continue to enjoy the rest of the day with us. Thank you so much.
I feel like I'm at the lectern to preach this morning. I was being trained as a pastor, so. Thank you. So, as was shared earlier, I'm Andre Richards. Apologies for the laptop. We had some last-minute issues, and I'm saving the trees. So, the State of the World Population Report for 2025, the real fertility crisis, the pursuit of reproductive agency in a changing world. In 2014, Jamaica released the findings of the 2021 Reproductive Health Survey. It revealed that while 46.4% of births over the last 5 years were planned, the large majority of births, 53.6%, were unplanned, and these include your mistimed or unwanted births. Although the report highlighted that the total fertility rate for the country is at 1.9 births per woman of reproductive age, down from 4.5 in 1975, there's a need to unpack the issues that would have contributed to the high percentage of unplanned births. The nature of the reproductive health survey did not allow us to get that deeper dive to understand why so many pregnancies were unplanned. We hope that the views of the 2025 State of the World Population Report will provide some possible reasons that may help policymakers to understand what is happening with fertility rates globally, and that based on Jamaica's demographic profile, we may be able to draw parallels with countries in the study with a similar makeup at the moment. So we see policymakers and medias ask, why are women and people failing to have children and failing to marry? Beneath the questions is the assumption that individuals are making deliberate choices to forego marriage and children. You can see this presumption in the headlines here from around the world about countries with different fertility profiles. But we at UNFPA know that in women's everyday lived experiences, they are too seldom able to exercise true, unhindered reproductive choices. While people do indeed have more reproductive choices than ever before, the choice remains deeply restricted, especially for women and girls. And unfortunately, we also see an increase in proposals and laws designed to steer people's choices. And we see demographic arguments used to limit contraception, for example. And some of these headlines point to even more extreme and alarming proposals, as seen on screen. So in this report, we're trying to understand exactly what is happening at the level of individual people. And to help us understand this, we conducted original research. We commissioned YouGov, which is an international internet-based market research and data analytics firm, to conduct online surveys in 14 countries with various fertility profiles. And you see them on screen here. We asked about fertility desires, expectations, and barriers and enablers to reproductive choices. The country selection was limited due to budget and other issues, but we're still confident in the strength of the results, and we do believe what is on screen is representative for the world. Importantly, the survey has helped to shape a much larger and in-depth UNFPA Youth Reproductive Choice Survey for approximately 50 countries that will be launched later this year. So this is really just the beginning, and we'll go quickly into some of the results. Key insight, number one, there's a gap between desire and reality. 1 in 5 people don't have the number of children they want. Most expect to have fewer children than desired, and some will have more than they want. And fertility is often discussed without understanding personal aspirations. Insight number 2. People want kids but face barriers. The majority in the survey want 2+ children, but they identified main barriers: financial insecurity, housing, childcare, job instability. Gender inequality impacts both the workforce and fertility as well, and these were flagged in the report. And the solution: gender equal policies and family-friendly workplaces. Inside 3, there's pressure and unintended pregnancies. And as was seen in the example from Jamaica, you can see right here, 1 in 3 experienced unintended pregnancy. 1 in 5 felt pressured to have children. Lack of contraceptive access, social pressure, and misinformation played a role in these unintended pregnancies. And there's a need for inclusive health education and also more male involvement. Number 4, prescriptive or restrictive fertility policies often fail. And we would have seen the situation with China, where they had to revert on their one-child policy. And we have many other examples worldwide. The common policies for baby bonuses and short-term incentives, they're often ineffective and counterproductive. And some violate rights and by reducing education access, etc., for females as well. And reproductive coercion leads to long-term harm and distrust. So what people really need, and this is where the real crisis comes in, is reproductive agency. And reproductive agency, as how we defined it from UNFPA in the report, is the freedom to choose if, when, and how to have children. And the needs include access to health care, financial and job security, gender equality and supportive partners, and also hope for the future. Climate and conflict pandemics have been cited as some of the issues which cause hope-related fears. So you may ask, Andre, is there still a role for policy? Yes, there is. What is needed are not policies from a space of demographic anxiety, though, but policies that help to meet people's needs. The good news is that when we ask people what they need, they tell us. And here are a few things that policymakers should consider in this time. Healthcare policies, the full range of affordable, quality, accessible reproductive health services everywhere. Fertility care for everyone who needs it. More inclusive care. From the economic side, childcare, supporting youth transition to adulthood, family-friendly work. From education and information, unbiased, medically accurate information is needed for in and out of school. Education systems can better accommodate families as well. So the theme for today's World Population Day is empowering young people to create the families they want in a fair and hopeful world. And on screen, please see the views of 3 young people from different countries around the globe. The future feels bleak, says somebody in the Philippines. A lot of policies worldwide are against women's health, and the female says she feels that this pushes us to stay single and not have children. A young man, I'll just read a young man. Bringing a child in the world is only one step. The real challenge is raising them. And for a favorable upbringing, there must be good environment and adequate infrastructure. So you're seeing the difference from male and female as to what the needs are for the young people. The good thing about it is that Jamaica is now in the category of countries that now have revised population policies, addressing all those gaps that we would have identified. All of those areas in healthcare, economic, education are key areas in the revised population policy. And so Jamaica is far ahead than most countries in the region, and I dare say some of the countries in the world. So thank you, and the conversation and discussion continues.
We now turn our attention to the keynote address, which will be brought to us by the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton. Now, Dr. Tufton has had a distinguished political career through which he has paid homage to the adage that people are at the center of development. Recognizing this, Dr. Tufton has placed significant emphasis on the population's experience of public health policies that serve their best interests and uphold values such as human rights and responsibilities, patriotism, dignity, and inclusion. Now, Dr. Tufton, in his current portfolio, has maintained a strong philosophy of comprehensive public health policies that recognize the realities of the population, its structure, and its salient features. He evinces a global appreciation of the role of positive and sustained health outcomes for integrated population development. To this end, his indefatigable efforts and unswerving emphasis on wellness through programs such as Jamaica Moves, and I know we're all aware of the Jamaica Moves programs, and other public health campaigns advocate positive lifestyle changes to combat non-communicable diseases, NCDs, as well as other preventable illnesses. Dr. Tufton's advocacy has extended to promoting corporate and community partnerships to enhance the delivery of primary health care through health clinics. Now, a major initiative from one of our partners here, the EU, has seen the Ministry of Health and Wellness, under Dr. Tufton's leadership, make strides to reduce maternal and child mortality, with the anticipated long-term impacts on survival and life expectancy. And I know we spoke about life expectancy increasing in 2011 to around 75 from 65. So beyond Dr. Tufton's policy achievements, he's also a respected author of memoirs on public policy, leadership, and challenges in national development. He holds professional certification in business administration, management, and marketing, and has a wide-ranging experience in public policy. Now, with the launch today, as we pause to look at another consensus-driven policy and frameworks on impactful action for sustainable population, Dr. Tufton is ideally suited to address us here today. And so without further ado, I ask that you help me welcome the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton.
I'm going to try to keep my speech shorter than the introduction. How is that? Because I know you have a lot of other things to discuss, and let me just begin by saying thank you very much to Dr. Henry from the PIOJ for inviting me to address this gathering. He and his team, who have done a lot of work, and PIOJ, as you know, is an extremely important agency for planning, and I want to commend him and the work that he has been doing. It's been a lot of work, and we go way back. So we were in agriculture together and other things. So thank you very much for that. Let me also recognize your special guest, Ms. Jenny Klarlsen, who is the officer in charge, United Nations Population Fund. Thank you very much. Good to meet you. And I'm sure you have other team members here. There are so many others who are here that I want to just say thank you for having me. And I have to recognize my own PAHO representative, Mr. Ian Stein, because he's the one I place all my burdens on when I need answers to questions related to health. So I have to give him some recognition as motivation. How is that? For all others who are here, guests, well-wishers, participants, delegates, media personnel, and others, thank you very much. I want to begin by commending the PIOJ and the UN Population Fund on this National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and the State of the World Population Report 2025. Both reports clearly are important for the world, for all of us as respective countries, as policymakers, as planners. We must be driven by data, and we must dig deep within the data that we capture to influence the decisions that we make. Otherwise, we'd be groping in the dark and not sure about what is happening and how to solve the problems that we have. So I have a deep respect for those who gather data and those who put the data in a format to allow for the simple man like myself to understand it and of course, as a policymaker, to allow the data to drive policy. So that's very, very important. And for that reason, I'm here today in my Jamaica Moves outfit to share with you and to thank you for this opportunity. I'm not going to go into the details of the report because I know you would have exhausted some of those conversations. I want to lend my thoughts to some of the headline conclusions of the report. So it is, I believe, now confirmed again that we have a population that's not growing, and certainly Jamaica is no exception there, where we are still in and around 2.7 million persons when compared to 2019, and I am told with an approximate growth rate of about 0%, which means that we're not growing. And indeed, if you look at the projections based on birth rates, and the replacement birth rate, I believe is 2.2, we're now at about 1.9. And if you look at the migration of our nationals, more often than not for economic purposes, and then look at our mortality rates in terms of persons dying, and some dying young, as we have outlined in my sectorials 2 years ago, it is very understandable why you would see not just a tapering off, but over time, based on the forecasting, if this trend continues, into a decline. And there are some who say in the next 20 to 30 years, Jamaica could be hovering closer to 2 million, all other things being equal, than to the 3 or 3.5 where we need to be. It poses a very significant challenge and a lot of policy implications and discussions. For starters, we need to examine why. And I believe these reports are part of that series of analysis, which is very important. The whys are many from my perspective. The whys are socioeconomic, they are cultural, they are linked to the highly mobile labor market, people moving from one place to the next. The advancement, gender advancement, more gender equity with women achieving more, wanting more, entitled to more, and supported by a system that allows them more. So training and delays. And there are some clinical too. Fertility levels are declining, and there's a lot of discussion as to why this is so, both in men who enable and women who produce. Is that a good way to describe it? Okay. So in looking at all of this, it puts us, there is a very rich set of data that the both studies allows us to make some more definitive conclusion as to where do we go from here. From a policy perspective, and indeed, if I may just spend a little time in health portfolio ministry that I represent, the challenges are significant. For starters, we need people to man the healthcare sector. And we are now faced with a near crisis around the healthcare workers that we need in a population where the sick profile, for want of a better word, requires greater intervention. In the first instance, for prevention, that's a community primary care, and then of course, later on for curative at the level of the secondary institutions. Health right now is bordering in some areas on a crisis in terms of healthcare workers. And this is not unique to Jamaica, just to be clear. It's a global thing. In fact, the projections suggest that we need some 20 million or so healthcare workers between now and 2030. And the production, for want of a better word, of those healthcare workers are not happening nearly as fast enough to play catch up with the demand that is there. And what is happening is that there's a giant sucking sound. If you remember Ross Perot in one US election when he described Mexico, that is pulling all our very qualified and effective healthcare workers from Jamaica into the North American market, and in some instances into Europe, in the United Kingdom. 500 or so of our specialist nurses migrate each year, on average, leaving our neonatal units, intensive care units, operating theater units, accident and emergency units in very short supply, and impacting the quality of service delivery by virtue of not having enough bodies and enough boots on the ground. The other amplification of this dilemma is that we, even if we wanted to train more, we're restricted by virtue of clinical rotation space, meaning operating theater beds to practice around. There's a ratio of student to beds, and by faculty, or the shortage of faculty, people to train. And that sometimes is not fully understood by those who call for more training. Training has to be facilitated, has to be enabled. You have to have the people and you have to have the infrastructure. And there goes another major challenge, or bottleneck, if you will, to reduce training. So the net result is a shortage, and a shortage that is getting worse, particularly as the free market and the mobility of labor allows for greater competition and a bidding war for those talents. And when you're in the backyard of the United States or developed world, you can appreciate why the giant sucking sound would go one way. We don't have the resources to compete on the demand. That places us in a real challenge. And it starts with the population issues. How do we address that? We have been trying to do a couple of things. And I'm using health as an example because that's my immediate attention, but I believe it could be expanded across the board to all sectors, portfolio areas, and we could actually generalize as it relates to small island states, developing countries like Jamaica in the region, which hopefully will be a part of your attention here in the conversations that you're having. Well, I think policy has a lot to do with it. And policy has to address these binding constraints with a willingness to see what represents a threat as a potential opportunity, and to sensitize the population that may be more enticed to see the threat than the opportunity. So take the mobility of labor. And I know it's election time, so I have to be careful when I talk, right? Because people are sensitive to the fact that if we allow inward flows of labor, we're bringing in people to take away the locals' jobs. Is that a natural tendency? For the average person, that's how people think. And it's an understandable tendency, but the challenge is there an alternative in the short to medium term? How do I man my hospitals that I'm actually building out now? Spanish Town Hospital, building out. Cornwall Regional, increasing beds. Western Child, new hospital. Maypen, St. Anne's Bay, all under construction or expansion. I'm proud to say. That's why you must vote for us in the next election, for those who... I had to get that in. How is that? I had to get that in. But aside from that, it is a bigger dilemma to build and can't operate. And we've seen that. We've seen that in the region. I don't want to name the countries, but I know 2 Caribbean islands that have built hospitals and cannot operate them because they don't have the healthcare workers. And it may be the pressures of the system that says if you bring the foreigners in, then you are depriving us, even though we don't have enough of us to man the facility. There has to be a sensitization around that and embracing the mobility of labor, where it operates 2 ways. Now, what that means too is another fairly unconventional thought process about how the world is structured and how people move and from where they move. we have a natural bias to think that the North lies all our solutions within the North, the borders of the North. And I dare say, while there are many solutions within the borders of the North, it doesn't capture all the solutions, and indeed some of the better solutions may have to be from the South. Am I pointing in the right direction? I'm not sure. So a few months ago, I went to the Philippines and India. Not because I like long travel, because I don't. But those countries have particular capacities. I heard your chair speak about India being the most populous country. When did they get that title? About 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Yeah, China before, right? And more liberal, obviously, in terms of their capacity and willingness to procreate. That's the right term. And I went to both countries with the specific intention of examining the collaboration that I believe is going to be necessary to facilitate a different kind of mobility of labor, more from the South than from the North, South-South cooperation. Because if you look at those two countries, both are extremely experienced in healthcare training and the provision of healthcare talent. The Philippines is actually 110 million people. They produce 11 million healthcare workers each year, but they export about 11 million healthcare workers also. They are probably, outside of Cuba, one of the largest exporters of healthcare workers in the world. A Filipino nurse is almost in every hospital in North America, in Europe, and everywhere else. But they have 87 public hospitals under the government, maybe another 300 private. So their culture of training as a means of exporting or making labor mobile is it's accepted. It's something that they do for that reason. And the question is whether we can tap into that. India, similarly so, with some amount of variation. The point is that the policy now has to shift to how do we embrace by recognizing that labor mobility has to operate in two ways to account for the challenges that we face based on the population challenges, not just in absolute terms, but in specific qualified talent that is required. And hence that conversation is taking place. The long and short of this is that MOUs are going to be determined, and those MOUs will mean free flow. Last week we had 4 Nigerian faculty members coming into Jamaica to start as part of our cadre of specialist trainers, educators, in order to expand the pool and to address the shortage of faculty. And they are now here in Jamaica because we have an MOU with Nigeria. So we're pursuing Philippines, India, Nigeria, and of course everybody knows about Cuba, which has been a traditional supplier of labor. The vision is that in the future, not only will we see clinical rotation out of those countries to fill the void that we have, but we will see, more importantly, a sustainable approach to training so that we can train more of our own, whether they stay here or go abroad. We have a larger pool. That's, to my mind, is an important pivot in the policy that has to be embraced as part of how we right-size the workforce, certainly in healthcare. But it has to overcome the objections that would exist naturally. And it has to be a willingness, there has to be a willingness to embrace outside of just looking to the north and making allies in terms of how population is structured. There's another policy posture that I think is going to be necessary in the context of healthcare shortages, and that is how we treat with primary healthcare, which is more prevention, community-related healthcare, and how we qualify persons to play a role within that community-based health posture. 8 years ago, when I became minister, 9 years ago, we had 1,000 community health aides These are persons who interact with the communities. They go into the homes, they give basic advice, they do the vitals of the old lady. They help to turn the lady with a stroke. They wash their dishes sometimes, comb their hair. But it's really a community-based intervention. They're also the frontline workers during COVID who went into the communities and advised people as to mask wearing and sanitization and so on. Extremely important, vital to my mind. They wear the blue uniform. They are not registered nurses. They are not even close to being registered nurses. But they have the qualifications to prevent and therefore take the pressure off the system of curing. And it is going to be more the norm than the exception, or should be. In other words, I'm saying we're going to have to find a way to reconfigure how we qualify persons to do specific jobs as opposed to the traditional approach where you're not a healthcare worker unless you're a registered nurse at the very basic. And that includes also how you specialize. And that requires a willingness to disrupt the current arrangements, whether at the level of the nursing council, the medical council, the nursing schools, how you configure the courses and how you train people for particular roles. Very, very important. I raise these two examples because I think they make the point that even with the decline in population and the net loss that we suffer as small island states, because this is not unique to Jamaica, it's right across the board, how we configure and how we integrate is going to be a critical part of policy going forward. The other final point, or not almost final, is how we improve our own prospects locally to improve and increase or encourage more persons within the population. And that is, too, a controversial issue. Many people call me the minister who want women to have babies, and I've been criticized a lot when I say have more children, even though I've contextualized it by saying if you can afford it. But a lot of people don't hear the if you can afford it part. They only hear have more children. And then you are criticized as saying, who is going to be able to pay the child education, the this and so on? It is a simplistic example, but makes the point as to how society and the willingness of society to embrace this idea of family planning, both pre and post childcare. The socioeconomic factors are a big play in whether or not people are willing to have children, and also the pursuit of that, to the extent that they are willing to have, is also a factor because of later willingness, put it that way, which then affects things like fertility levels and the possibility. We have, you may not know, ladies and gentlemen, we have one of the most advanced fertility clinics in the Caribbean at the University of the West Indies, where women actually can store their eggs. This is not encouragement, no, I'm just giving you a public announcement just in case, right? For many, many years. And men, too, can store whatever they contribute to the fertilization of the eggs for many, many years at a fraction of the cost if you were to go to North America. There actually lies a solution here if you want to make it motherhood later on in life. And maybe there needs to be a greater integration of those options or that option into the conversation. I don't know how many people know that we have an excellent fertility center up at the University Hospital of the West Indies with experts that do an amazing job, headed by Dr., I don't remember his name, but very, very advanced and does as good a job as anywhere in the world for cheap. Now, that may be one option. The other are the socioeconomic implications of facilitating family planning, things like paternity leave and maternity leave. So again, a good reason to promote the government. This is the government that introduced paternity leave a few years ago. Men, you know that? You know you can get some time off if you have a child, right? It never existed 4 years ago. It exists now. Maternity leave obviously was always there. We are now trying to facilitate in our health system, but also across government, child care centers within large clusters of the work environment. So many of our hospitals now actually have a nursery for workers, where your child can be taken care of while you work during the course of the day. Sounds simple, but it takes a big burden and adds to the family planning process. And we are also now trying to integrate more things like housing, accommodation, some of the things that on the face of it would make one consider less so having children because of the concerns around cost and convenience and so on. I'm giving you the real pragmatic, practical application, because you are giving me the numbers. I'm telling you how those numbers are going to be used or should be used, because it is a fact that we run a risk by shrinking our population, ultimately not having the labor force to support economic growth and advancement that we need. Final point is, how do we deal with this reality of an aging population? And it is a real challenge for us. Jamaica has to now look at how, we all have to, how the fact that by 2030, we will have maybe about 350,000 or so, if my memory serves me right, of the population that will be over 65, I believe, based on what Professor Eldemire Shearer told me. I don't know, maybe, yeah? Is that about right? 450, you said? 350? Huh? Over 60, right. And there's a distinction now between the over 60s and over 65s. Over 65s are dependents. You need to redefine that, by the way, because I know a lot of 80-year-olds who are very independent, right? Thanks to modern medicine. But, right, so you have the 60s and then over 65s. And the question is, what is the role of that demographic within our society? I have always been impressed. One of the times I'm impressed with the North American lifestyle, when I go to the supermarket and I see a 75-year-old gentleman packing my bag, and he's doing it with amazing pride. And the truth is, the alternative to that would be to sit down in his room, not be active, and over time, be affected by movement skills, motion, and suffer fate. That really leads to a sad end. You know, we are like this, our life cycle. And the last thing you want is for, on the downward, you feel sad about your life. And activity is the greatest approach to maintaining a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and hopefully a sense of happiness. That's the holistic approach to health. It's not just about your head hurting you or not. And I do believe that the laws are going to have to be reviewed to look at persons' engagement in the workforce, not so much by force, but maybe by choice. And there may need to be a secondary approach to our legislation around the labor laws to allow. I mean, I'll tell you, I have had, on any given year, I've had at least 10, 12 approaches by persons who have reached the legal retirement age of 65, who have appealed to me almost emotionally why they want more time. Sometimes it's economic, but I'm of the view that more often than not is that they're not so sure how they would go home to sit down and do nothing when they do believe they have the skills, the energy, and the drive to continue to do something. And I think maybe we need to stratify how the laws work and allow for a limited number of hours, maybe not the 40-hour work week, maybe a 20-hour work week, to capitalize on the skill sets that we have, who otherwise are going to be put out to pasture, for want of a better word, because we believe, based on traditional understanding, that they should go enjoy the rest of their lives in purgatory. I don't think realistically people see life that way anymore. We all want to continue to do something, and not everybody has an orchid patch or a garden to spend their time. Can I get an amen for that? The closer you get to that age is the more you see that pointed out, as we all are, right? But I do think that's something that a PIOJ or the United Nations Population Fund at the level of the global environment can start to argue. I would like to see more of our retired nurses, for example, come back into the system in a more structured way, because I believe they have a lot to offer. They still have a lot to offer. And I would like to see it done in a way that is organized and where they can contribute and help to support the arrangements that are there. And so how you care for that and keep them engaged is one challenge. How you care for them is another. And that's why last sectorial I announced the AI, artificial intelligence integration into public health, because there are certain dynamics about the 65 and over, I think, from a health perspective. For one, they don't want to live with their children anymore. They prefer to keep their sense of independence. And the child or children are likely to be concerned about mommy at 70, still living in their own place. Question is, how do you bridge that gap? Part of bridging that gap is how you monitor. And monitoring can be greatly enhanced through technology. Whether it is checking their blood sugar level every morning and getting a reading on your phone, or it is some device that allows them to communicate. These are becoming more the norm in the developed world, and I think we have to embrace that technology as part of how we enhance and support the changing demographic profile or the population demographic transition that is taking place. So ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of food, hopefully there's a lot of food for thought. There's a lot of conversation that needs to take place about the realities that we face. Part of it is to enhance and expand. I didn't talk about trans fats and why we need as a world to combine our efforts against trans fats, and sugars, salts, and tobacco and alcohol, which I think is contributing to fertility decline. But those are all parts of the discussion that are going to be necessary as we move the process forward. What I will conclude by saying is that we do have a challenge that makes the PIOJ and the UN Population Fund very relevant. I think you have to stimulate these discussions and help those of us who are not as brave in disrupting the status quo, because we fear that the voters may not like it sometimes, that you encourage us by lending some credibility to these unusual suggestions. So if I go to my voter and say, is Wayne say so? Then they might say, all right, it's not your fault, it's Wayne's fault. We'll still support you, right, Wade? But I think these are very important. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you again, Honorable Minister, for that very comprehensive presentation. Thank you so much for clearly giving us a picture of our current population condition. You spoke to some very important factors: socioeconomic, labor, gender, and even our current health statistics. So thank you for that. You went on to share some very practical solutions. You spoke about increased sensitizations, provision of talent, training, community-based interventions, family planning, or current world-class fertility solutions. You spoke about legislation and even the very pervasive artificial intelligence, how we can use that to our advantage. So thank you so much for a very comprehensive presentation. At this time, Honorable Minister, we will ask you to kindly receive copies of the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and the UNFPA State of the World Population Report 2025. Making the presentation to you on behalf of the PIOJ is Director General Dr. Wayne Henry. Ms. Jenny Klarlsen will now make the presentation on behalf of the UNFPA. At this time, we will ask the following persons to join the Minister, the PIOJ, and UNFPA on stage to participate in the handing overs. Representative from the delegation of the European Union, Mr. Aniceto Rodriguez-Luez, as we are recognizing today that the EU provided material support in the formative stages of this policy. Mr. Andre Richards, UNFPA Liaison Specialist for Jamaica. Mr. Easton Williams, Principal Director, Social Planning, Policy and Research, and the Director of Population and Health, Mrs. Mareeca Brown-Bailey.
We want to thank everyone so much for your attention. It has indeed been our pleasure to be your host for this portion of the program today. And
thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your participation and attention. Do stay with us. We have more engaging segments ahead.
Kitty child, age, finally catch me. When me wake this morning, me leg them feel weak. When me get up, gray hair they come out of me eyelash, and me forget which part me put me new teeth. Oi, but I saw anyway, Miss Kitty. Everybody have a time and a place. That's why we must live good with one another. So we 20, don't go to waste. But if you look at it serious, Miss Kitty, it's not only me one grappling with age. The whole Jamaica society aging, we all have to get on the same page. What me mean? All right. Although we having more senior people and them living till 100 years plus tax, we also have enough working somebody to produce and invest outside the box. Yes. So we have to take advantage of the population structure. How much picnic, how much seniors, how much youth, and change up the economy to match that. To advance with development, for truth. Yes, one good business, it lead to another, and by the time you look, more people employ. Then we make sure everybody contribute to pension. So into poverty, nobody don't have to die. Yes, we all have to get on the same program, government policy, private sector and thing. Fix the health sector, education and housing in response to this thing called aging. You see, the senior people, them full of the wisdom and experience. And the picnic, them have energy and intellect. and the persons with disability full up of courage. And the youth, them bad pan the intimate. Yes. All I have to say is, you see this thing called aging? It's bigger than arthritis and sugar. We make opportunities for big business and small. If you ask me, population aging is a bonus. Make we boost development for one and for all. You learn quick, young man. Very nice talk. Aye.
Let us boost development for one and all. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Christena McCarthy. And Christena is the National Coordinator for the Jamaica National Adaptation Planning Project at the PIOJ. And the poem that she just did was written by PIOJ's own poet, Mrs. Colette Robinson, who is a Senior Director at the Institute. So at the PIOJ, we not only deal with policy, but we have serious talent. Now, we have gotten to a very interesting part in the program, and that is the panel discussion. And I am going to invite my panelists to join me on stage. The first person we will have is Mrs. Shelly Edwards. And Mrs. Shelly Edwards is a Senior Director for Social Policy, for Social Protection and Gender at the PIOJ. And Shelly is such a wonderful person because we laid hands on her this morning to actually sit on the panel because the person who was supposed to be here was unable to make it. Joining Shelly is Mr. Easton Williams, and he is the Principal Director in the Social Policy Planning and Research Division at the PIOJ. Mr. Williams is a demographer with over 30-odd years of experience. He's an expert in this topic. You would have heard Mareeca speak about him earlier. So this is Mr. Williams. Joining Mr. Williams is a media practitioner, writer, and entrepreneur, and she's the newly crowned Festival Queen for Kingston and St. Andrew, and she will be coming to bring the youth voice to our panel, Miss Brithany Clarke. Our next panelist is Dr. Natasha Mortley. And Dr. Mortley is a senior fellow at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the UWI-Mona campus. And her research focuses mainly on migration and gender. And our final panelist, another youth voice in the panel for this morning, and he is the Male Empowerment Officer in the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport, and he is Mr. Joseph Snowball. Okay, great. I know that my panelists are here. I'll now turn over to my fellow facilitator to start the discussion, Mr. Andre Richards.
I don't know if it's morning still. It's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. So as you would have heard from morning, a lot around the demographics changes which have taken place in Jamaica and by extension the world. And we believe we have a good panel here this morning to help to further explore with us some of the key areas which were highlighted in the revised population policy for Jamaica, and by extension, the State of the World Population Report. So this morning, I'm gonna start with Mr. Williams. I call Mr. Williams Mr. Cairo, as he was in Cairo in 1994 when ICPD came into place, and that mandate has provided a guidance for UNFPA function worldwide. And so UNFPA owes a lot to Mr. Williams. So Mr. Williams, this morning it was made mention of Jamaica's total fertility rate of 1.9. And as stated in the Reproductive Health Survey 2021, and we know that most countries, all the developed countries and most of the countries in the Caribbean are now at a state where they are below replacement level fertility. And so in light of this, what measures can be put in place to address the demographic changes that we are currently seeing?
Well, that's a big question, you know? Let me say that the total fertility rate, as we saw in the reproductive health survey, 1.9 below replacement level of 2.1. Recent data, though, from the Registrar General's Department on births would suggest that the total fertility rate is even lower than 1.9. So here we as a country really has a serious issue there, you know, because with fertility rate of less than 2.1, in the context of high migration, it means that, look, the population will be shrinking absolutely with a fertility rate of under 2.1. But when you compound that with high migration, as you know, fertility adds to your population. Migration, external migration, depletes from your population. And that's also depletes from your population. But also immigration adds to your population. Now, in a context like this, where the population itself is not sustaining itself, meaning that the fertility levels are below 2.1, in theory, if you have something depleting your population, you know, as well, then your population will be declining faster than a country that doesn't have migration. Now, that is the dilemma we face in the Caribbean, where the fertility levels are declining below replacement, as well as high migration. So the region, not just Jamaica, but the region is facing very, very serious demographic consequences if we do not address this issue. You know, by giving persons the agency, you know, to make decisions in order to manage their fertility more effectively and to have the children that they want or desire. You know, generally we see over time that the desired fertility is somewhat different from the actual fertility people have with a man or a woman. So the point is that report in the UNFPA is making, and that study is indicating that we provide the measures and facilities and all of that in order to enable people to have the children, the amount of children they want. You know, and in fact that has been a part of our national population program and fertility program over the years. You know, informed choice is a central part of our population program. If you want to say about what measures to be implemented, you know, I mean, there are a number of measures that can be implemented, and I know I'm going over my time, right? Yeah, you know, but I mean, there are quite a lot of measures, and in fact, the study, you know, that UNFPA did indicated a number of things that can be done. That is breaking the barriers that in the reproductive agency by providing suitable economic conditions for reproductive decision making, eliminating gender discrimination, providing good quality sexual and reproductive health care, adequate support for child care and education, and positive support for partners and communities are some of those major areas mentioned in that study. And I think as a country, our next step is really to sit down and look at what we need to do as a country in order to improve on people's reproductive agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'm going to go at the other end. So we looked at fertility, but now I'm going to go all the way down to aging. So, Mrs. Edwards, Jamaica's population is considered aging, and that is because the share of the population aged 65 and older was estimated at 9.5% in 2024 and is expected to reach around 15% by 2050. And we will all agree that this has implications for our social protection system, our labor market, and our long-term health care. So my question for you is, what measures would you recommend to strengthen the social protection systems to support active and healthy aging?
Okay, it's afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I do believe that Jamaica already has a really strong policy framework for aging. We have launched today the Population and Sustainable Development Policy. We also have a national policy for senior citizens and other policies. And I do believe that this context is absolutely critical for a start. However, as we go beyond just the policy framework, it is important that implementation follows. And as we implement, of course, we have to monitor, we have to evaluate, and to do further strengthening. So within this context, of course, we have various ministries, departments, and agencies that are implementing programs to support elderly persons. And we have programs that are being implemented, for example, by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. We also have the National Council for Senior Citizens, and they have a host of programs along with other MDAs and non-government partners. We have to remember that aging, yes, 60 and over, we refer to that population group as the elderly. But before we get to 60, there are a number of systems, programs that have to be in place. And for example, we have to ensure that our working age population is contributing to ensuring that they are providing for their latter years. For example, social insurance, and all of us know the National Insurance Scheme, and there are other programs. So we have to ensure that the working age population is well informed, well encouraged, well motivated, and even before that, students in schools, they have to be aware, and we ensure that we are building that foundation. So when we get to the latter years, of course, we are able to reap those benefits. We have to also ensure that the system for identification, we have national identification system now. We have to ensure that that is fully implemented so that we can identify those who need to be, let's say, supported in various areas, and that no one is left behind. So there are areas that we are doing very well in, but there are other areas that we have to keep an eye on to ensure that the elderly population is well integrated. And I do believe that access, overall access, is going to be critical. We have to ensure that there is access, both physical, technological, and other forms of access are available to the entire population, including the elderly. So as we age, then there are a number of disabilities that we can acquire. And so if our society is accessible for all, there is reasonable accommodation, universal designs, access in terms of financial inclusion, then everyone will be able to benefit, including the elderly.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, Mrs. Edwards. Brithany, I want to say congratulations firstly on your achievement as the Kingston and St. Andrew Festival Queen.
Thank you.
I do believe that this is a great avenue for young women to to participate in and also be engaged in developments in the country. And we want to thank you as well for coming on in the last minute as one of the panelists. And so you have heard from morning all the discussions around aging and where the situation is in the country and also globally. Yes. And so my question to you this morning, or this afternoon rather, is with Jamaica's aging population and decline in fertility rates, how do you think the country should invest in young people today to prepare for the future?
All right, thank you. And thank you for the well wishes, everyone. So for me, I love to look at it at the fact that we are facing the reality of an aging population, which simply means that the young people are not just the future, they're actually the present. So we do have to invest now in ensuring that we are adequately prepared for that future that we are trying to achieve. So when I think about the overall framework of young people, investing in young people and shaping young people for the future of Jamaica, I think about, of course, education and the training, so ensuring that there are facilities in place to ensure that we not just get the standard education and learning, but also equipped with digital literacy, equipped with climate activism and climate preparations, and just thinking about the different avenues for entrepreneurship, because we're not only now looking at applying for jobs, but also ensuring that young people are ready to create jobs for the next generation. The next thing I look at as well are access, as well as inclusion. So I love the mention of persons with disabilities, just ensuring that we make provisions to ensure that everyone has access. So access to fair education, access to affordable and quality education as well, and just looking at the different terms of accessibility in terms of adaptive technologies and just the opportunities to be able to learn and train without barriers. So those are some things I think about. And then, of course, for the young people, we love to think about the quality of life that we're going to live. So we're looking for opportunities for housing. What are the provisions to ensure that we are stable, we are secure, and we are ready to raise families in an environment that is inclusive and conducive to that holistic development. So for me, it's a holistic approach. We think about young people from all facets, but also we have to look at how it is that we are preparing now for the future Jamaica that we want to live, work, raise families, and do business.
Brithany.
Thank you very much, Brithany. Mr. Snowball. Young people tend to say that we as policy makers and planners, we tend to leave them out. We tend to plan for them instead of actively engaging them in all the plans and the policies. So, if you had the chance to speak directly, and you do today because PIOJ is here and a lot of other entities, had a chance to speak directly to policy makers working on the population policy, what is the one thing you would ask them to prioritize for adolescents?
All right, thank you for that question. When I look at especially Goal 9 that talks about achieving a youth achieving their fullest potential, we have to consider also Goal 1, because I believe both of those goals have some sort of link. And the link I see is that we have to, as Brithany was mentioning, take that holistic approach, but they also have to get an understanding that there needs to be respect. That is my major thing right now, because looking at the health, if we look at the healthcare system as it relates to youth, we're doing well. It's not a case that information is being hidden from them, because even when I reached out to the Ministry of Health to find out information available for youth, I found out there's a teen hub in 2 parishes. There's inclusion within the school curriculum and different things that are there. So it's not that we're hiding things from them. There's education and training and all of that, but I believe respect is what we need to focus on right now. So policymakers can probably take the approach of, from a social perspective, in terms of looking at the values that they have within. Because the values that they have will determine the outcome in society. Because what we're seeing now is that with the rise in certain things like crime or whatever, it's that there is no respect. And studies have shown, I've done a lot, I did research and it looked at that respect is a fundamental value in order to achieve. And if there is no core values present within a child, a young person, they'll be unable to achieve and will not see this sustainable growth that we need, this sustainable development that we're working towards. We'll be building industries and factories and things, And because there is no respect for self and others and no core values, nobody will be in them to fill them. They'll not want to go to school, they'll not be respecting others, and the list goes on, but I'll end there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'll go on to my next question, but before I do, I just want the audience to know that there will be a time for you to also pose questions to our panelists. So as you think of any questions, you can jot them down, and we will definitely give you the chance to ask your question. So Dr. Mortley, over to you. Now, this is a very special topic to me that we're about to talk about. And we're about to talk about the issue of migration, because in recent times, there's been a lot of discussion about migration and high-skilled migration. And we heard the minister's presentation when he spoke about persons in the health sector. If the education minister was here, I'm sure they would talk about education too. And so with all that has been happening and the high rates of immigration that we have been having to our usual destination countries, the US, Canada, and the UK, what policies, initiatives, or programs can you suggest to ensure the viability and the sustainability of our country in light of all this high migration?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all. Thanks for that question. And I want to preface my response by saying that Jamaica has been leading the way in migration. Historically, Jamaica has been the first and was the first to move. You know, whenever there are Caribbean movements, the first movement to the Panama Canal for work was Jamaicans. The first move to the UK on Windrush, Jamaicans. So Jamaicans have really been leading the way, and Jamaica is also leading in terms of policy and programs related to migration. And I think that is indicative of the fact that migration is an integral part of Jamaican economy and society and development. And also it signals Jamaica's commitment to good migration governance. So having said that, there are many policies and programs that Jamaica already has in place. Like my colleague on the panel said, Jamaica does have a very strong policy framework already in place. So in terms of policy, I think Jamaica is one of 2 or 3 Caribbean countries with a migration policy, and they were one of the first. Jamaica is one of few Caribbean, CARICOM countries with a diaspora policy. So I think one thing we need to do is to revise and to strengthen those policies, to have concrete actions in place to implement the policies. Long ago, we spoke about revising policies every 5 to 10 years, but I think we are now in an era where the world is fast-paced, things are moving, there are emerging trends. Everybody's seeing what's happening in the US. I mean, you would have to be under a rock to not know what's happening in the US and how it's impacting migration in the Caribbean and in Jamaica. So we have to look at the policies that we have, the migration policy, the diaspora policy, and start revising them based on critical issues that are emerging in real time. And of course, the data is going to be important to that. The policies need to be more rights-based. They need to focus more on migrants and migrants' rights and migrants' protections. And the policies also need to be, I think, and the minister said it earlier on, we traditionally and historically, we've looked to the north when we think about migration, because largely it is economic and labor migration. But we now have an opportunity to look inward. And we now have an opportunity to focus more on intra-regional movement, South-South movement. And CARICOM presents a wonderful platform for us and for Jamaica. Jamaica now has come on as chair of CARICOM, so there's opportunity there. Jamaica recently became the first Caribbean country to be the champion for the Global Compact for Migration. So the framework is there, and I think that's good, and we need to accelerate these. But also in terms of policy, in terms of programs, I want to link some of the programs that I'm going to suggest to the discussion that we've been having today. We're losing a lot of our skilled migrants. I am not of the view that we need to stop or try to stop migration. People have always moved and will always move. but we need to see how we can better manage it. A lot of our skilled migrants are in the global north, they've migrated, but there's opportunity now to put programs in place to encourage them to perhaps come back home or to look more towards contributing to home economy and society. So I know in the 90s, I think, I can't remember, don't hold it against me, I think PIOJ had a program of returning professionals, a returning professionals program. Not sure where that is right now, but we need to look at reviving programs such as these. The COVID pandemic taught us or showed us some important things. There are professionals, Jamaican professionals in the diaspora during COVID who wanted to come back home and who did come back home, you know, even if it was for a short period because remote working was, you know, the thing during COVID. So programs that encourage and facilitate that sort of return of professionals so that they can contribute to our society and economy. At the university, what we've seen is more applications from Caribbean persons living abroad. So with what's happening in the US with the Trump administration, cuts at universities in the North America, and a lot of academics their jobs are threatened and they're now applying to the UE for lecturing jobs and lecturing positions. But one of the main deterrence is the salary scale. The fact that, you know, of course, the salaries are better for all categories of migrants, are better in the global north. So we need to look at that. We need to look at how we're having pay parity based on the global labor market so that we can encourage and incentivize our skilled migrants to come back home. The benefits of the Caribbean, or the advantage that we have, is the social and the cultural. The Caribbean is a space where we have good benefits, we have a better quality of life. The minister spoke about we have fertility clinics in the Caribbean that are doing amazing compared to the North. I mean, our fertility clinics, you pay $8,000 US, don't ask me how I know this, $8,000 US for fertility IVF compared to $20,000 to $25,000 US in America. So we have these social and cultural and environmental benefits, but economically we're not on par with the global labor market. How do we scale up the social and the other benefits vis-a-vis the fact that the salaries may not be the best? Because we have people saying, I will come back home even if I have to take a pay cut, because the Caribbean is the Caribbean. So we need programs that can, one, try to give us greater parity on the global labor market, but also promoting the advantages of the Caribbean so migrants will want to come back home. Another program I would think of, I know my time, I'm over time, but there are so many programs. Caribbean persons and Jamaicans traditionally tend to circulate. You know, migrants don't really leave forever. I mean, we circulate and we operate within a transnational space where we have a transnational household. The family and the home is in the Caribbean and the migrant is in the US. So programs that can better facilitate that sort of circular movement of migrants so that they are more encouraged to take advantage of that type of movement. Our nurses used to circulate, Jamaican nurses used to circulate a lot. I mean, they went to Florida for 6 months and came back. So what programs do we have? Our programs need to look at these realities, is what I'm saying. And there are many opportunities for return, for circulation, and for just migrants contributing to home and contributing to community. And I think the policies are there, but the policies now need more to be evidence-based and focus on these realities, these new emerging issues, and putting programs that will fit what's happening in our time. And of course, promoting it, because people need to be aware of what exists. Migrants need to be aware. Many migrants didn't know about the Return of Professionals program. So I think there needs to be a sensitization and a re-educating of our people around migration and what migration is beginning to look like in a current period. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mortley. So Andrea and I, we have a number of questions on our paper, but we, at this point, want to throw it out to the audience to see if there is anyone who has a question they'd like to ask. We have 2 microphones that are roving. Okay, great. I see the hands going up. I love that.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gloria Goff. I'm taking the opportunity to throw 2 questions. Sound selfish? No. One is for one of the young panelists to respond to. Based on your knowledge, do you hear young persons speak about like raising families, or do they focus more on, the cars and the houses and the money and so on? So I need to know if that is a case that you think will help to increase our population. The next question is to the person who spoke about the elderly and the programs that government have. My question is, do all these programs really benefit the rural elderly? Meaning that I know like the social pension and so on, but I'm talking about like activities, programs that will help to keep their minds here with us and to keep them active. And sometimes quite a number of their children move on overseas elsewhere, they live alone. Do these programs really focus a lot on rural elderly?
Okay, thank you very much. So first,
yes, sure. Okay, so I love that question, thank you. And to be very honest, the majority of persons who I associate with, we tend to focus on building our careers and building our lives first, and then we think about raising families. So it's usually an afterthought, unfortunately, but I believe that it is really just in terms of how it is that we envision the life we want to live and the kind of life we want to live. And that starts with building a career and having a foundation that will help us to support that. So with that in mind as well, we also think about the fact that there's a heavy promotion on responsibility and responsible family planning too. So it's not just about going out and having babies now, but ensuring that you're having babies responsibly, you're in a financial position to take care of these babies, and also that you do have the family support. So the right partner, for example, and the right family structure. So there is the callback now for us to bring back the village raising the child and different kinds of community-based interventions that can support family planning and raising families. So that's really where my demographic stands. I'm not so sure about my counterpart here, but for me, that's really what we think about first.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
So before Shelly answers, I don't know if Joseph has anything.
Yes, Joseph.
Mark just wants to say detail.
When I heard that question, I was like, here we go. Because I agree with you that what my friend group, the people who I speak to, we are saying the same thing, that once it was, when you were younger, when I was younger, I heard my grandmother say, when she was younger, as she started work, time to have a child. We are like, we can't do that. Because if we now are 25, 22, and we're working jobs that, yes, they are paying well, thanks for the reclassification and all of that. We have to also remember that we have living expenses.
Yes.
And if we take on a child, and we don't want our children growing up in lack, because a lot of us went to college and struggled through college, and we saw our parents go through the struggle of, even with the recession in 2008, 2009, how it affected the economy. When the GDP fell, by 0.7% one year, then 3.0 the next year in 2009. So we're looking at that reality that we're not going to grow children in a home that we're lacking anything. And we're prioritizing our goals and our careers, because even what the state of the world population, that report said, is that people are prioritizing their desires.
Yes.
People are putting off having children. And we have to also acknowledge people have agency over their choices. Because in the 1980s, when China and other countries said, the one-child policy, and in Jamaica, when we said 2 is too many and that kind of thing, when people had 3 and 4 children, we're kind of shaming them through policy and how we said things. We have to now remember that we are benefactors of that, and we're now saying, if 2 was too much then, Why do I need to
mix it up?
Yes.
You understand? So we're coming from that point of view that we're deciding to we're holding on to our chance now at doing well in life. Yes. And the children, it's not that we're saying that we don't care about the population or we don't care about expanding our legacy or whatever people want to say. Is that we have to now think about what is the best economic choice for me to do.
Yes.
Whoa. I'm going to take away a lot of things from this meeting, you know. But I think what I'm going to take away the most is something that you just said. You said we were shaming people through policy.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up on the two is better than too many policy. And I never at any point viewed it like that. But that's amazing. That's very interesting. Mrs. Edwards, over to you on the rural poor.
Okay.
The rural elderly, sorry, not the poor, the rural elderly.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Goff, for that question. There are a number of programs that are at the national level. So I know the National Council for Senior Citizens, for example, they have their senior citizens clubs, and they are in every parish. They also have activities that they conduct island-wide to ensure that regardless of where you live, you can participate. They have their sports day, income earning opportunities, and so forth that they implement on a wide scale. There is also the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. They have the indoor and outdoor poor relief program, and that also is island-wide. There are also the national social assistance programs, and everybody would know, for example, PATH and so forth. So there are initiatives that reach and seek to strengthen reach to rural areas. Of course, we know that access oftentimes is greater in urban centers, but definitely that is one of the points I was making, that it's not just to have the policy, but to ensure effective implementation. And in order for us to have effective implementation, no one can be left behind. Whether you live in urban centers, whether you live a country, or you live in the town, you should have that access. And I do believe that is something we have to continue to keep an eye on to ensure that we are meeting our objectives for all persons in our country.
Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. I know we have other questions from the floor, but Mr. Williams, I want to raise something with you. One of the conversations that we hear very often is that Jamaica has a demographic dividend. However, I don't think most persons realize that having the population is just the beginning, and that reaping the dividend requires far more. And so from your point of view, with this large working age population that we currently have, what do you think needs to be done in terms of training, education and training, and also the labor market at this moment?
Let me tell you this, that, you know, we as a country have, over the years, kind of a boast that we have a demographic dividend in the working age. Now, we are actually coming to a close of that. We are actually reaching the peak of the population in the working ages. And in the near future, from now going forward, the working age population will start to decline. So that bonus that we say we have in the working ages is being depleted, or will be depleted in the near future. So, you know, that is one thing. However, let me say that we had a demographic bonus in the 70s, 80s, and some places in the 90s, you know. The bonus among children, school-age population, that was a bonus. Now we're having the bonus within the working age population, but that is ending. We're looking forward to another bonus. The bonus, a third demographic dividend. And that is a bonus of older people in the population. Now, we will be having a population coming up. It started now. But in the future, a major part of our population will be people over 60 years or 65 and over. Now, what do we do with that population? Huh? Minister Tufton this morning mentioned that we need to relook at issues relating to retirement. And of course, that is one thing. And I do think that as a country, we need to relook, re-examine our current policy of retirement and move towards a more flexible age of retirement going forward. Also, how do we mobilize that excess population that we have? And some of them are quite healthy, as the minister said this morning. How do we integrate them in the workforce? You know, and that is a critical point. You know, that we need to relook at age of retirement. We need to look at how we integrate the large older population. And many of those older population are quite healthy, as I'm saying, you know, into the labor market. And retraining, you know, those are critical questions that we need to face going forward. How do we mobilize our next demographic dividend? Will be in the older generations. That is the point I want to make. Training, of course, you know, we need to increase our training of everyone in our population. We need probably to develop a national human resource development program where we center not just on those persons who are excluded from the training system. How can we bring them in? How can we bring persons with disabilities into the training system, into the education system, much more effectively? So we're mobilizing all of those people for development. You know, Minister Tufton this morning mentioned about a selective approach to use immigration, people coming into your country with the necessary skills that are being depleted through migration. And that is a strategy, I think, that we need to have something more formalized, you know, as to what extent do we use these skills that are outside of our own country, bring them in. What is the role of our diaspora in that respect? What is the role of different countries, as ministers were saying this morning, that people from Philippines, people from India, Nigeria, wherever they are, and bring them in to train, as well as to provide service, you know, until we can build the human resource capacities that are necessary. Now, let me say that these are relatively short-term, medium-term measures. In the longer term, when our population shrinks so much, then we probably need to have a much more robust immigration policy, where we bring in people, you know, much more on a more fluid basis. You know, so these are issues that I think we need to look going forward. You know, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Williams. Okay, so I realize that the time is going, and before my audience leaves, and I know it's way past lunchtime, I am going to allow one more question from the floor. I see the hand. Oh, two more questions from the floor, and at that point we would wrap up after. So, two more questions. I see Stacy and I see Mr. Vance.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, panel. My question is to Mr. Williams. But before I ask the question, I just want to say that I ditto all the persons who spoke this morning about your rich history as it relates to population issues. And I want to say that I learned a lot from Mr. Williams. I want to publicly, you know, just indicate that I have learned a lot from that history. And thank you, sir. So my question is it possible for questions that currently have fertility rates below replacement level to restore or even exceed replacement level and replacement level fertility, right? And if so, are there any examples? Are there any policies to demonstrate this potential?
Okay, let me say that there is no actual example globally where fertility has been restored back to replacement level. I read something about South Korea recently, that they had introduced some of the very things that UNFPA mentioned in their report, and the fertility levels bounced back somewhat. You know, but then when I questioned and say, oh, to what extent it bounced back, we were seeing that it bounced back to 0.75. 0.75 is a fertility level that even women in the population will not be able to sustain themselves in the next generation. You see? So look, there's no country that has bounced back who have gone below replacement level fertility and bounced back. Now, building agency is critical to enable everyone in the population, men, women, to have the fertility levels that they desire. You know, that is the strategy, and that is what that report is saying. Now, whether or not people actually achieve that will be another question. You know, ask the question about overpopulation or underpopulation is a question that study says we need to ignore that. But address the real issues to enable people to have the fertility that they want. Now, the point is that that is exactly the position we took in our national population policy, where we want to maintain our replacement level fertility up to 2030. We want to maintain it at replacement level. Now we are below replacement level, and I'm not quite sure how far below replacement level we are. But even if we do not reach back up to replacement level, and in fact, the fertility levels in Jamaica need to be above replacement level. Why? Because of the effect of migration on the fertility levels. So the point is that whether or not we can achieve that, we have not had any example globally to follow. But agency, those kind of ideas to implement, to facilitate people to have the fertility that they want or desire, is a key strategy in going forward. We could be the first. You know, that would be something, you know, but we need the empowerment of our population to achieve that. Thank you.
Mrs. Shavant?
Excellent panel for surfacing a lot of compelling issues. We heard about policy, the importance of policy that Jamaica is replete with policies, but it's the implementation and monitoring and evaluation that is critical. It is also more nuanced and targeted interventions, and in this regard, I would like to suggest that gender equality mainstreaming is critical. A report just recently came out. Women in Jamaica have among the highest educational attainment globally. However, there's still much work to be done. The gender pay gap is higher among women. Unemployment is higher among women. I haven't forgotten the men. Education and the importance of education among men is not as important as it is for women. It goes towards gender socialization. Girls must stay home, stay off the street, don't get pregnant and read your book. For boys, they're allowed to roam free. It has implications for them. It has implications for the educational system and the classroom that is full of female teachers. So where are the male role models for these boys to get the educational acumen, to get the tertiary education, to be able to earn the money to address what we have been hearing today are some of the barriers and constraints as it relates to fertility decision making. Affordability. You can't afford a house. You can't afford to raise your children to the quality that you want to. So as we take away what we learned today, my plea is for us to do a lot more work in gender equality mainstreaming, because that is and intersectionalities thereof, because it's not just men and women, it's different categories of men and women and their interaction, and to have a more nuanced approach to the programming that needs to be done to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Mortley, you want to chime in here? The switch to the gender aspect of things? And also Mr. Snowball after, switching to his male empowerment officer role.
Yes, thanks for that intervention. I think my third area would have been the importance of gender and migration research. And I just want to add and to underscore all what you've said. When it comes to migration, the gender research is so critical, not just migration, but the population and all of the policies that already exist. I cannot underscore enough the importance of data. We always talk about sex disaggregated data, but it's really about gender disaggregated data, because we have to go beyond the binary of just male and female, and we have to have a deeper understanding of gender and the ideological dimensions of gender and how gender impacts every facet of life, right? So the gender disaggregated data, looking at age and sex, looking at education and sex, the fact that women are outperforming boys at all levels in our education sector, right? So we have to, the data needs to be disaggregated so that we can get a deeper understanding of the gender dynamics and how the gender is actually impacting the policies that we're making. And I will also add to that the gender research also gives us tools to analyze what's happening and to let that feed into our policy and our program. So for instance, intersectionality. Intersectionality is really an important tool for gender analysis, because it shows us, or it reveals to us, that when we look at gender, all men are not the same, right? Gender is really about power. And all men are not the same. There are different groups of men that have different degrees of power at different periods in time. All women are not the same, right? So the intersectional lens, which is a feminist lens, and people are afraid of feminism, but it's a critical tool for analysis because it shows us different groups of men and women in our population and the different gendered issues that they have to deal with, they have to grapple with. And this is what's critical when we start to implement our policies and put programs that are evidence-based. They are based on gender dynamics within our society. For instance, when people migrate, when we look at remittances, remittances are gendered. When women migrate, they send back remittances more regularly, and they send back remittances to multiple households. And research has shown, I'm a migration and gender researcher, my research has shown that as migrants stay away longer from their home, their sending countries, men tend to remit less and women are remitting more over a longer period of time. And that is very telling, right? So when women migrate, multiple households are benefiting. And that is important. The community is benefiting because women are operating within diaspora groups and diaspora communities that are supporting communities at home. They're supporting through churches, they're supporting through the schools, the alumni, right? The nurses associations. I mean, when we map the diaspora, there are about, last time I checked, there were about 250 diaspora groups in the US, unofficially. They're unofficial, they're not operating with government support. They're operating unofficially, and women are at the vanguard and are critical to these diaspora communities. So the gender mainstreaming, like you said, is very important, but also a deeper understanding of what gender really means. It's not just about numbers. It's not just about men and women and numbers. It's about ideologically what does gender mean and how does gender impact every facet of family, households, and communities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Snowball, 30 seconds?
30 seconds. That's but as you mentioned before, I'm a male empowerment officer with the Bureau of Gender Affairs. And we have a 4-step process. That's unrestricted access, strategic alignment, relentless advocacy, targeted action. And we're doing that to have 4 main things happening: gender equality, equity, socioeconomic empowerment, and social justice for all people. I acknowledge the point that you raised about more gender mainstreaming being done, but we are doing what we can with the resources that we have at the Bureau of Gender Affairs, which is the government's national machinery for gender mainstreaming and all things related to gender issues. It's not something that can be done. We want to see the results happening now. We'd really love that. We've been seeing steady growth, steady things where things are reducing, because even now, in 2022, there was the establishment of the Sexual Harassment Prevention and Protection Act. There is the gender-based violence unit that was established by the minister and different things to help to close that gap. Because even recently, a report was published this year, and Jamaica ranked 38 out of 143 countries in terms of the gender gap that we're closing. And that was published by the World Economic, I think it's World Economic Forum. So I understand that there is a lot of work to be done, but we have limited resources. The team is not a huge team. We're a few people working together to get that mandate completed, and we have a lot to do with a little bit of people. And the resources, not that the government has trillions to give just us, because if we wanted to get, if the things that we need to get done require a lot of resources. That's human capital and also money and other resources. Because even with the National Shelter Unit that is there, that is established for women who are we call them survivors of gender-based violence. We have been able to purchase properties, and it's work in progress. So I don't want to say, take time with us, but there's there's steady progress that we're making. Because even if we go back to what the EcoVolve study said, how much money it's costing the Jamaican population, it costs us, I think, $1 billion US. That's what the violence against women and girls costs. So we're acknowledging that, and we're making steady progress to closing that gap and to ensure that we're looking out for everybody as best as we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. At this point, I will turn over to my co-moderator to wrap things up for us.
So what can be said, thanks Antonette, thanks panelists. What can be said is that the conversations are on, will have to continue. I don't think the time is sufficient to delve into all the issues. And so what we have done this afternoon really is just to touch the surface. There are deep, nuanced issues, as Denise and others would have pointed out, because one of the major gaps in the discussion is the gender dividend. There is a gender dividend to reap. And we always speak about the not costing of the unpaid care, domestic care that women do for the large majority. And so those discussions will have to take place in other fora. And I believe you have the Dialogue for Development series coming, and those are opportunities to have those deeper conversations. So we just want to thank everyone for taking time out to be with us and sharing your views, and we greatly appreciate them as you have helped us to stir further thought. What Joseph said about the two is better than too many policies, something that stands out in my mind, because it is something to really reflect on. So I just want to thank you again, and I see we have some persons coming to give some tokens to the panelists.
Now we're asking our panelists to stand. Sure. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone. Yeah, that's it. Oh, wow.
I guess I want you to hold it so they can take a picture.
Oh, give me a picture.
So we want to thank our panelists as well as our able facilitators for taking us through this session. Thank you very much, and we have a little bit more in store for you before we break. So am I handing over? And so now I'm going to hand over to Laura Davis, who will move the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone, honorable guests, speakers, and dedicated participants. I am honored to deliver the closing remarks and vote of thanks for the launch of Jamaica's National Population and Sustainable Development Policy and the 2025 UNFPA State of the World Population Report. On behalf of the Planning Institute of Jamaica and the National Thematic Working Group on Population and Development, this launch would not have been possible without team effort and commitment of a number of individuals and organizations. We extend sincere gratitude to our keynote speaker, Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton, for your insightful address, which has reminded us of our demographic situation and the need to implement the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy in response to the current and emerging demographic changes, such as the migration of our skilled workforce in sectors such as healthcare, our declining fertility rates, and shrinking population. We also express our deep appreciation to all the speakers from the UNFPA, the European Union, and our very own Dr. Henry. Also to our performer for that nice cultural presentation. Your contributions today have all been invaluable. A special thank you to our planning and organizing committee from the PIOJ and the UNFPA for your hard work in planning and executing this event successfully. We also thank the AC Marriott Hotel for hosting us and all the service providers who ensured that this event was delivered smoothly. We are also very grateful to our international development partners such as the UNFPA and the EU and other sponsors. Thank you for your generous support. Your contributions have made this launch possible, and we are appreciative of your efforts. We hope that we have strengthened your understanding of population and development issues to support the Program of Action for the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy, and look forward to the continued collaboration and commitment of our key ministries, departments, and agencies, NGOs, private sector, academia, and other stakeholders. We would also like to highlight the importance of having the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy fully implemented and monitoring and reporting on the results of the policy. We also have highlighted the key fertility issues coming out of the SWOP today and the need to create an enabling environment where desired fertility equals actual fertility. And this also reinforces our theme for World Population Day today, empowering young people to create the families they want in a fair and hopeful world. Let us all work together to achieve our national population and sustainable development goal of ensuring that population processes are optimized to achieve a balanced population size, structure, and distribution in urban and rural areas, and to improve the well-being of the Jamaican population in all dimensions of a sustainable, equitable, and just society. Once again, on behalf of the PIOJ, the UNFPA, and the National Thematic Working Group on Population and Development, thank you all for being a part of this memorable event. We invite you to join us for lunch and have yourselves a great weekend.